In 1980, I decided to go on a riding holiday in Spain during the month of May. Leaving UK, we flew south over France and then Spain to Malaga on the south coast. From there, it was by coach to the little town of Orgiva, our main base. From there, we would trek north on horseback over the Sierra Nevada mountains, including the Malheucan, the highest point at 11,600 feet. Then a circular route back to Orgiva. This is the little town of Orgiva, nestling at the foot of the surrounding hills, and its church with the very distinctive high twin towers. After starting our trek, we would not see Orgiva again for 14 days. There were 10 of us in the party, and we were soon put to work. We were to be fully responsible for our horses, grooming, feeding, saddling, and of course riding. I enjoyed brushing my horse Lola every day. Becoming familiar with the horses was important for both them and us. Complete with sun hat, saddlebags, riding breeches and boots, I was ready to go. Lola, now with saddlebags in place, waited patiently. He had, after all, done all this before. We went for a trial ride to get the feel of things. One guy fell off, much to the delight of everybody, including the horses. The next day our riding holiday really began, and we headed off into the wide open spaces of the Spanish countryside. Crossing rivers and climbing hills was all part of a day's ride in order to reach the little villages where we would stay for the night. Our lodgings were not exactly five-star luxury, but after a day's riding in the hot sun, the fact that there was no hot water did not seem to matter. It was up early the next day to attend to the horses and, of course, to have a friendly chat with them. As we set off, we could see the countryside for miles ahead, slowly rising to the distant hills and another little village. Going up a hill or mountain meant that at some stage you had to come down. Occasionally we had to dismount and walk down over some tricky bits, and then remount and continue. After about an hour we rested the horses and ourselves, and then continued with the hot sun beating down from a clear blue sky. Our next destination was now in sight, nestling under the snow-topped mountains. The horses seemed to know and trotted happily along. This village appeared to be much nicer compared to others we had stayed in. However, just round the back it was a very, very different story. The next day we were instructed to ride very carefully as we were going up and over the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it would be quite a difficult climb. As we climbed higher, the track became more difficult over loose shale and rocks. Leaning well forward to help the horses, we made it to the top and nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. We all dismounted and gave the horses a well-earned rest, including ourselves. I had to have a photograph taken of me on Lola, and I got one of the other chaps to oblige. We were right below the summit of the Malheucan at 11,400 feet, the highest mountain in Spain. We all took our photos and then set off to walk down the mountainside. After descending quite a way, we were able to remount and rode on, resting now and again in the wonderful sunshine. Horse and rider posed for the camera. Then on again down some steep areas, taking some well-earned rest for both riders and horses at the bottom. Following a dried up riverbed in very hot sun, Lola's and my shadow clearly outlined, we were met by a guy riding bareback who had come to lead us into the town of La Kalahara, immediately below its impressive castle. The castle of La Kalahara was built in the 15th century for the Duke of Mendoza, a rich nobleman. It has appeared in many films, including The Lion and the Wind with Sean Connery and Candice Berger. Oh, what tales it could tell. Our lodgings were pretty basic in this place, right next door to the stables. We set off the next day and after a long trek, descended the hillside and stopped at a little river, letting the horses have a break, a drink and a chance to relax ourselves. The horses revelled in having their saddles off, and it was a good time to catch up on making some notes. Later in the evening, we arrived at the most primitive of villages. On the left is the entrance to the only bar in town. And again, on the trek a problem arose with the horses, and here the locals were only too pleased to help. Early the next morning, after grooming and saddling up, we prepared to set off once again on another beautiful day. Today we were advised our route would take us on a narrow paths through rocky outcrops, where we would have to walk and lead our horses. In some places it was safe to ride, and we hopped on board again. Eventually our destination came into view, and we were told a surprise was in store for us. No riding today, instead a visit to the historic city of Granada and the Alhambra Palace. Built by the Moors in the 11th century, it has a checkered history, but has survived and is now one of Spain's major tourist attractions. The craftsmanship to create such beauty was breathtaking, and the architecture was quite stunning. Our surprise visit over, we set off the next morning and were soon leading our horses down some very difficult terrain. On occasions, I could feel Lola gently pushing me in the back, as if to say, "Come on, get a move on." Lola had a lovely temperament, and when I called him to take his photo, he obliged by looking at me and pricking his ears up. The warm air was filled every day with scents of the plants and herbs as we went along. On occasions we passed some very strange-looking trees that looked as if they were from another planet. As this was the nearest I would ever come to becoming a cowboy, a few more photos were required. Lola, however, did not like being separated from the group, and I had to hold him on a very tight rein until the job was done. Soon our next village came into view. This was our last night out on the trek. It was a pretty place, and after settling into our lodgings, we took advantage of the late afternoon sunshine to relax and have a drink or two. Next day we set off for the last time to make for Orgiva. The horses knew they were nearly home and trotted along very happily. we clattered into the town, a group who were very happy, tired and sunburnt, but had become very experienced riders. I reluctantly said goodbye to Lola, and after a shower, changed and met up with the others for a drink. Relaxing in the lovely Spanish sunshine was heaven. We all felt pretty good about the fact we had survived. Getting on and off a horse was now as natural as breathing. After dinner we posed for a final group photo, and then it was time to pack and go to Malaga Airport to get the flight home. Looking down from the plane, the fact that we had been riding over that countryside was already starting to become a memory. It had been a wonderful holiday, something totally different.